fascinating. And I think like 40,000 things are happening between every single line. And I just got really thrilled.
It began quietly, without the dramatic flourish the press so often imagines, without statements, without explanations, without a single curated photograph to soften the truth. One ordinary morning, Jamie Dornan and his wife, Amelia Warner, simply vanished from the public eye, as if the weight of the world they had been forced to inhabit had finally pushed them to step outside of it, if only for a moment. Their phones slipped into silence, their schedules evaporated into emptiness, and within days the couple was seen at Heathrow Airport, boarding a flight out of London with no entourage, no stylists dragging suitcases, no anxious assistants hurrying behind them. Just two people who looked worn down by weeks of scrutiny and desperate to find a small pocket of air where they could breathe again. It had been brutal, even by Hollywood's unforgiving standards. The headlines had turned merciless after the incident everyone spoke about in rushed whispers and exaggerated tones. The moment Dakota Johnson's unexpectedly sharp comment during an interview had reignited every buried rumor, every whispered question, every careless assumption the couple thought the world had finally outgrown. For days, Jamie's name dominated tabloids and social media feeds, dissected, pulled apart, debated as though strangers had been personally invited into the most fragile corners of his marriage. Every outlet framed him as something different. Some claimed he was choosing sides. Others painted him as the man agonizingly torn between two women, a narrative he had never recognized and never consented to, and through all of it, he said nothing. Not out of guilt, not out of secrecy, but because he had always believed silence was the safest option, the calmest impulse in a world addicted to noise. Yet inside their home, that same silence began to feel heavy, suffocating, a presence of its own. Jamie had always been the steady one, the man who handled storms with a measured breath and a quiet resilience, unfazed by gossip, unaffected by strangers' opinions. But this time the noise had grown too loud, too personal, too invasive. His wife's eyes had begun to hold questions he didn't know how to answer. Questions not of accusation but of exhaustion, of wanting to understand a world that seemed determined to misunderstand them both. And perhaps worst of all, Jamie had started to feel himself shifting under the pressure, looking in the mirror and seeing a version of himself he no longer recognized. Strained, scattered, carrying a burden that seemed endless. One night, in a moment of rare vulnerability, he had whispered, his voice cracking beneath its own weight, "I don't know how to be both things anymore, both the actor and the husband, both the public figure and the private man, both the calm center and the storm's unwilling subject." Amelia had not responded with accusation or fear. Instead, she simply reached across the quiet space between them and took his hand, a gesture soft enough to feel like grace. And the next morning, with the calm clarity that sometimes arrives after sleepless nights, she gently suggested the thing he had been too afraid to voice. "Let's get away, just you and me." And so they did. They escaped to the western coast of Ireland, a place Jamie had always described as the closest thing to truth he knew, where the sky stretches endlessly into blue-gray melancholy, where the ocean breathes in long, steady exhales against weather-beaten cliffs, and where anonymity is not a privilege but a natural state of existence. There, they found temporary refuge in a place untouched by the frantic rhythm of the world. No paparazzi hiding behind hedges, no studio executives demanding statements, no flashing lights waiting to catch them off guard. For the first time in months, perhaps years, Jamie could walk down a quiet street without someone whispering his name, without paparazzi lenses capturing the slant of his shoulder. Him and his wife. Locals saw them only a handful of times. Once at a small cafe overlooking the restless sea, where Jamie wore a worn woolen jumper and a beanie pulled low over his brow, half his face hidden behind a newspaper while Amelia tucked herself into his shoulder, smiling at something he said, the two of them existing not as a headline, not as characters in a scandalous narrative, but as two ordinary people sharing a moment. They didn't talk much that morning, not because they had nothing to say, but because there was comfort in the shared quiet, in the knowledge that for once no one was watching. No one was interpreting their silence as tension or their laughter as denial. But healing, of course, is never immediate. Some nights the tension returned like an unwelcome echo. Jamie would stand outside on the small wooden deck of their cottage long after Amelia had fallen asleep, staring out toward the endless horizon as though searching for an answer buried somewhere in the dark water. The guilt lingered, not for anything he had done, but for everything he had failed to say, for the years of allowing others to dictate the narrative simply because he thought silence was the kindest choice. The world had turned his marriage into spectacle, and by saying nothing, he had let it happen. His silence, meant as protection, had instead become fuel for speculation. One evening, as they walked along the rocky shoreline beneath a sky streaked with fading light, Amelia finally broke the quiet that had settled between them. "You can't fix what people believe," she said softly, her voice almost carried away by the wind. "You can only fix what's real." Jamie stopped walking and looked at her properly for the first time in days, seeing her not as the woman the press labeled the wife or the silent counterpart, but as the woman who had weathered the silent war beside him. Her face was calm, steady, warning places but strong in others, and in that moment he realized just how much she had endured, how many rumors she had absorbed, how many comparisons she had quietly brushed aside, how often she had been forced to live with the shadow of another woman's name hovering over her marriage, even though she had never asked for such a burden. Still, she had chosen to stay, chosen to trust him, chosen to believe in the truth beneath the noise. Later that night, sitting across from each other in their tiny seaside cottage, a bottle of wine between them and candlelight flickering against the walls, Jamie exhaled a sigh that sounded almost like surrender. "I needed this," he whispered, his eyes glassy with emotion. "Not the escape, just this. You and me. Away from everything." Amelia smiled faintly, her expression soft with understanding. "You didn't need to escape," she replied gently. "You just needed to come home." Those words settled into his chest with a weight that felt like truth. For the first time in a long while, something inside him loosened. The pressure, the shame, the exhaustion didn't vanish, but they softened, leaving behind something quieter, something human. He watched Amelia laugh at something small, something insignificant, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the candlelight, and he realized how easily fame can blind you to what truly matters, how quickly one can become lost in the noise until the simplest things, the sound of a loved one's laughter, the warmth of a hand resting on yours, feel like anchors pulling you back to yourself. In the days that followed, they settled into a gentle rhythm, one that felt almost sacred in its simplicity. Mornings began with coffee by the sea, wrapped in blankets as the wind nipped at their faces. Afternoons drifted into long drives along winding country roads, windows down, the scent of salt water mixing with the earthy smell of rain-soaked fields. No destination in mind, no obligations waiting at journey's end. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Other times they argued softly, honestly, releasing the thoughts they had held inside for far too long. Every night ended the same way. Two people holding on to each other in the dark, not as celebrities under scrutiny, not as husband and wife trying to prove something to the world, but simply as Jamie and Amelia, two souls trying to mend what stress and speculation had worn thin. One morning, Jamie opened a leather-bound journal he hadn't touched in years, a habit long abandoned under the crushing pace of fame. He wrote slowly, the words emerging as though dredged from a deep place within him. Fame is noise, love is silence, and somewhere between them, I forgot how to listen. And in writing it, he realized just how desperately he had needed this space, this breath, this return to something uncurated and unperformed. For Jamie, their getaway had never been about hiding. It had been about survival, about remembering the sound of his own heartbeat beneath the static of the world. He watched Amelia one afternoon walking barefoot along the sand, the wind pulling her hair wildly in every direction, her eyes squinting against the sun, and something inside him swelled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for her patience, for her resilience, for her belief in him, for the way she had somehow stayed steady even when the world around them tried to turn their marriage into entertainment. Living by the sea, he realized, had reminded him of something essential. How small he truly was in the grand narrative of life, how temporary the storms of public opinion really were, and how fortunate he was to have someone who understood him not as the character people projected onto him, but as the man he actually was beneath the layers of expectation. Their days continued like this, unremarkable to anyone else but profoundly healing to them. They cooked simple meals together, watched old films on a tiny TV with poor reception, sang along to songs on the radio during long drives, and sometimes sat in absolute silence watching the waves crash against the rocks. Healing moved slowly, but it moved. Jamie found himself sleeping better, breathing deeper, laughing more freely. Amelia, too, softened around the edges, her shoulders losing the tension they had carried for months. And though the world beyond Ireland still buzzed with speculation, still waited for their return, they no longer felt beholden to it in the same way. They had...
Was there a wedding dress in something I just saw? No? All right, I'm not good at this game. All right, here we go.
It's really hard.
All right, is it?
He didn't know what waited for them when they returned. More headlines, more questions, more opinions disguised as truth. But for now, none of it mattered. Not the noise, nor the commentary, nor the endless speculation that had begun to feel like a second skin clinging to him. All of it had faded behind them like a distant storm losing its fury. The ocean stretched wide and endless before them, an expanse of shifting blues and grays, breathing in slow and ancient rhythms, and for the first time in a very long while, he felt something loosen in him, something long clenched finally uncoiling. "I needed this," he murmured again, softer, almost as if confessing to the wind rather than to Amelia, who stood beside him with her arms wrapped around her waist against the cool coastal breeze. But as she turned and smiled at him, her face warmed by the fading amber light, he realized he wasn't speaking about the getaway alone. He was speaking about them, about the fragile space between their lives that fame had stretched thin. The next morning, light filtered through the cottage windows like a quiet promise, gentle and gold, landing on the wooden floorboards and the worn armchair in the corner where Amelia had left her jumper the night before. The ocean murmured in the distance with the steady patience of something that had seen centuries of human turmoil and survived them all. And for the first time in weeks, Jamie Dornan woke without the heavy pressure in his chest, a tightness fame had carved there through years of scrutiny and expectation. Beside him, Amelia slept on her side, her hair scattered across the pillow like a soft, dark halo, her breathing calm and unhurried, as though the world outside had never demanded anything from her. He watched her for a long time, his mind strangely still, feeling a rare and delicate peace settle over him. The kind of calm that arrives only when the storm has finally drifted out to sea, leaving behind a silence that feels like healing rather than... For years he had played strong men, characters who held entire worlds together through sheer control and unbroken composure. But here, in this small cottage perched above the sea, he realized that control had never been strength. Letting go, allowing himself to be vulnerable, allowing himself to breathe, that was strength. Their getaway had no plan, no agenda, and that was precisely why it worked. They cooked their own meals, burnt the toast more than once, laughed over pots of boiling pasta, walked along the cliffs when the weather allowed, their boots crunching over gravel and damp earth, and spent hours doing nothing at all, simply existing in each other's company without the performance that usually hovered around their life. There were no makeup artists, no stylists telling him how he should look, no interviews waiting with rehearsed questions disguised as spontaneity. Just two people relearning how to exist without being watched. Later, he admitted to a friend, "It was the first time in months I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation." And it was true. That freedom felt almost unreal. Still, the world outside didn't stop for them. News outlets speculated about their location. Social media debated their marriage. Trending theories spun endlessly about Amelia's silence, about what it meant, what it suggested. But none of it reached them in this quiet refuge. They had unplugged from everything. No phones, no television, no press updates, no digital interruptions. The only sound was the sea brushing against the rocks below and the occasional cry of a gull circling overhead. On their third evening, when the temperature dropped and the wind picked up, they built a small fire outside the cottage and sat together under a wide, starless sky. The air smelled of salt, cold earth, and smoke, and the flames crackled like they were whispering secrets. Jamie stared at the fire for a long time, mesmerized by the way the flames twisted and reached upward, then said quietly, "I don't know how to be this person everyone wants me to be." Amelia didn't respond immediately. She knew him well enough to understand that his confessions arrived slowly, cautiously, as though he feared that saying the truth aloud might make it too real. After a long moment, she finally spoke. "You don't have to be him," she said, her voice calm, steady, familiar in the way only long-shared love can be. "You just have to be you." Her words were simple, but something inside him seemed to break open. Not painfully, but like a locked door finally giving way after years of pressure. Jamie had spent so long trapped between public expectations and private guilt. A man adored by millions yet unable to control his own narrative, constantly being rewritten by strangers who had never met him. He realized then that Amelia had never asked for perfection. She had only ever wanted honesty. That night, wrapped in blankets and warmed by the fire, they talked for hours. Not the kind of polite, surface-level conversation that fills the spaces of a busy life, but the real kind, the hard kind, the confessions that arrive quietly but land heavily. They talked about the years of silence between them, the small distances that had grown into chasms without either of them noticing. They talked about the strain of constant scrutiny, the fear of waking up to another headline twisting their lives into something unrecognizable. Amelia admitted that the hardest part wasn't the rumors themselves. Rumors could be survived, but watching Jamie retreat further into himself every time the world misrepresented him. "You were here," she said softly, "but you weren't really with me." Jamie nodded, staring at the firelight reflecting off the tears he refused to let fall. "I thought I was protecting us," he said. "I thought if I stayed quiet, stayed careful, stayed strong, I could keep everything together. But maybe I was just hiding." The admission hung between them, both heavy and liberating. Amelia reached out and took his hand. There were no accusations, no dramatic declarations, no martyrdom. Just her hand in his, warm, steady, forgiving. It was the kind of moment you never photograph because capturing it would strip it of its meaning. The next morning, they drove inland through narrow country roads lined with wildflowers, stone fences, and fields stretching in soft, rolling greens. They stopped at a small bakery in a quiet village, where locals didn't seem to recognize them, or perhaps did but politely pretended not to, and they laughed over mismatched mugs of tea and flaky pastries that left crumbs everywhere. Later they took a detour that led to an empty lake, smooth as glass, untouched by anything except the occasional ripple of wind. Amelia dipped her feet into the cold water and let out a startled laugh, turning to him with a smile that looked like the beginning of something new, something hopeful. Sitting beside her on the weathered wooden dock, Jamie felt the weight of the past few years lift, not all at once but gently, like fog disappearing from a valley as the sun rises. "I thought the world needed to forgive me," he said quietly, almost ashamed of the admission. "But really, I just needed to forgive myself." Amelia leaned